For far too long, we allowed standards to slip and different standards for men and women in combat arms, MOSs, and jobs. That's not acceptable. We need to have the same standard, male or female, in our combat roles to ensure our men and women who are under our leaders or in those formations have the best possible leaders and the highest possible standards that are not based at all on your sex, if you're a man or a woman. So I'm signing this memorandum today. The services will review, and soon we will have nothing but the highest and equal standards for men and women in combat.
Oh, this guy says thank you. That's not fair. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth just announced that he has signed a new memorandum which ensures that both men and women have the same exact fitness standards for combat roles.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying that we have for too long allowed the military, the United States military, combat standards to slip to unacceptable levels for far too long. And Secretary Hegseth signing a memorandum reversing these principles and instead holding male and female soldiers to the same physical standards. Now, I've got to say, this raises a whole lot of interesting stuff. You know, there's a difference between men and women,
Of course.
and we need women in the military. You can't operate the U.S. military without a significant number of women. And that was a little bit general and not very specific, but are men and women going to have to do the same number of pull-ups and sit-ups and, you know, be able to run the 100 in the same number of seconds and so on?
Well, this is something that came up in his confirmation hearing. There are a number of Democrat senators who attacked him for some of the comments that he had made in the past that were similar to this. And the way that he defended it wasn't to say, I'm against women in the military. It was to say the standards being lowered for women have put an asterisk next to their qualifications so that when they show up in a battalion, the men in their battalions look at them differently because the standards have been lowered when they believe they could have accomplished the same standards. And so I think this puts everyone on the same plane, and it also increases our own readiness and capabilities in a way that is desperately needed when you look at the threats we're facing around the world.
Well, and we've been having trouble, during the Biden years, big trouble recruiting at all. Recruitment numbers are way back up under President Trump. But I'm not in favor of holding women to the same standards when it comes to, and I spent 10 years in the Pentagon as a news guy and around the military for a decade, but you can't hold women to the same standard. Now, he's talking about combat troops, too. Not all troops are combat troops.
I think it's a good move to hold them to the same standard for combat roles. I mean, third wave feminism's message to women was effectively that they were the same as men, that there were no differences. Obviously, you and I both know that's not true. But if women want to be treated the same way as men, I think this is a way to do it, and also in a way that doesn't sacrifice effectiveness. I mean, lowering standards, PT standards for women in the military is kind of one of the original DEI moves when you lower standards to cater to the needs of a particular identity group. Overall effectiveness decreases, whether it's in the military or among air traffic controllers. So I think this is a smart move.
Well, it's a fact. And Joe Biden and his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Thoroughly Modern Millie, they were trying to fill the ranks with men dressing women, which is another discussion for another day. But
personally, I don't think that this goes far enough. And I'm afraid that if you make the standards the same across the board, then what's going to happen is the next time you get a Democrat in office, they will just lower the standards for everyone. Instead of forcing women to come up to the male standard, they will take men down to the women's standards. So then you'll wind up with a group of fairly fit women and really out of shape men. That's what's going to happen if you put them all on the same standard. Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm right, or do you think I have this totally wrong? Let me know about it in the comments section below, please. Yet another example of why women shouldn't be in the military, law enforcement, and all other jobs that require combat because they are not naturally equipped for it.
Hurry up!
Oh, goodness. This tiny woman cannot handle this man. And like, here comes just like Joe Schmo off the street to stop him and some backup. Like, this is This is not good.
Women should absolutely not serve in combat roles in the military. And I say this as somebody that is a decorated U.S. Army infantryman. I had a combat infantry badge, and I have 2 deployments in the Middle East. Women should not be serving in combat roles because, number one, most of the time, they are just not strong enough to do so. Now, when I served in my infantry unit, it was all male. They do not allow women in the combat infantry. And one of the reasons is because they're not physically capable enough to do the job. And the push to shove women into combat roles in the military has nothing to do with whether or not women actually really wanted to do this. It has to do a lot with the woke agenda that has been pushed through the military during the Biden administration and probably over these past 10 years. And if you look into the women that really have been placed into these combat roles, all of the qualifications, both physical and everything else, have been lessened so that these women can be there and so that, you know, the Biden administration and all of these people could get some woke points by putting them in there. It does not make them any more safe. It certainly does not make our military more safe. And it's just not a place where women belong, like I said, because they are physically, I think that we have figured out right now that women are physically weaker than men. There are some differences between the sexes. So Pete Hegseth is right. I do not believe that women should be in combat roles, and the left can just cry more about it.
I agreed with what he just said, but here's a commenter who disagrees. Why do you dumb combat down to entirely being about muscular strength when this is not actually true, especially with technology used in combat these days? I know I have a lot of military vets in the audience. You guys have to tell me what you think about this comment. Let me know in the comments section below. Does this guy have a point? Are we so technologically advanced that physical fitness is now irrelevant? Can we do everything by drone these days? I am not in the military, so you guys are going to have to share your expertise with me.
Should women be drafted in the military?
No.
No? Okay.
No, women should not be drafted.
Should not be drafted?
No. No.
They shouldn't be drafted?
I don't think so.
But they should be paid equally in sporting events?
No. But y'all want to be equal? So wait a sec. If the men are the ones tasked with every time there's a natural disaster, they have to go out and rescue people from the fires and the floodwaters. And every time there's a war, the men have to go and fight it and defend the country. And anytime there's a criminal who needs to be violently arrested, it's going to be a man who goes and does that, not a woman. Where does the equality come in? If we're doing the fluffy jobs, you know, we're all singers. We got a lot of singers and musicians, which is cool. It's great. I love music too. But y'all ain't like rescuing people and, you know, doing the heavy lifting or the dirty or the dangerous job. Like who collects the trash? Men. You know, who does all the steel working and oil rig work and all of the like sewer cleaning? Men.
It would be nice if you were paid based off of your real tangible contributions to society. Because we have so many jobs that are underpaid, like teachers. And then you have professions where people are completely overpaid, like professional golfers and movie stars. And if this is a real photo, this is deeply disturbing. Nobody wants to see daughters like this.
Mr. Hegseth, let's continue on this line of questioning about what's sometimes referred to as women in combat. I think that phrase is something of a misnomer. Many members of this committee have served in combat in the last 25 years, to include women and men. I'm sure all those men served with women, whether they were military police officers or they were pilots or whether they were intelligence analysts or medics or what have you. You served. I assume you served with women who were on the front lines as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And were those women anything other than skilled, brave, and honorable in their service?
They were some of the best soldiers I worked with.
So women have been serving in combat for a long time. Women have even been serving in combat units like infantry battalions for a long time in roles like medics or mechanics or what have you. So what we're talking about here specifically is women in ground combat roles in jobs like infantrymen or artillerymen or special forces. Until about 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Under Secretary Panetta, those roles were opened up to women to serve in. Has President Trump indicated at all that he plans to rescind or alter that guidance?
You're correct to point out, Senator, that these are the decisions that the Commander-in-Chief will have the prerogative to make. He has not indicated to me that he has plans to change whether or not women would have access to these roles. However, I would point out, ensuring that standards are equal and high is of importance to him and great importance to me. Because in those ground combat roles, what is true is that the weight of the ruck on your back doesn't change. The weight of the 155 round that you have to carry doesn't change. The weight of the 240 Bravo machine gun you might have to carry doesn't change. And so whether it's a man or a woman, they have to meet the same high standards. And Senator, in any place where those things have been eroded or in courses, criteria have been changed in order to meet quotas, racial quotas or gender quotas, that is putting a focus on something other than readiness, standards, meritocracy, and lethality. So that's the kind of review I'm talking about, not whether women have access to ground combat.
Okay, so thank you. So you expect no change to that guidance, but as you point out, in these specific jobs, there are irreducible physical demands. We expect our intelligence analysts and our mechanics to be physically fit in the military, but it's different when you're in the infantry or the artillery. You just mentioned a few things. Let me point it out. An artillery shell weighs almost 100 pounds. An Abrams tank round weighs around 50 pounds. The M240 Bravo machine gun with its tripod weighs almost 50 pounds. The average weight of a full kit, ammo, water, commo, body armor for a soldier is over 100 pounds. Nothing you can do can change any of those things, right? That is physical reality.
Go ahead. Yes, Senator. And I would say the requirements to handle those things in a ground combat unit, as far as standards, can look different than those of a medic or a drone pilot. And so it's not that it has to be the same standard throughout, it's standards to maximize efficacy of that particular position.
Let me read a quote here from one Army officer. While it may be difficult for a 120-pound woman to lift or drag 250 pounds, the Army cannot artificially absolve women of that responsibility. It may still exist on the battlefield. The entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held, regardless of gender. The intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. I assume, based on your testimony, you agree with that Army officer?
Absolutely. The standards need to be the same and they need to be high. And they need to be set by the people closest to the problem set, closest to the understanding of what is required by that job. Commanders, commanding officers, and COCOMs and elsewhere who understand the reality of what they face, that's the feedback we should get. That's what should be enshrined and enforced, and no other set of political prerogatives. When I talk about removing politics, ideological or political prerogatives should contribute to those determinations. Nothing other than the execution of the mission.
Thank you. For the record, that Army officer was Captain Kristen Griest, the Army's first female infantry officer and one of its first female Ranger School graduates. One final point, you said they need to be objective, gender neutral, and high. That's because the demands are, in fact, very high. The current physical fitness test for the Army has a minimum 2-mile run of 22 miles. Run. And I want the reporter to note that I'm putting run in air quotes, because 22 miles at 2 miles is not running. It may be jogging, it's probably walking fast.
Here you are, Leroy. Okay, Leroy. Okay. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Red Dawn Daily with your host, me, Dawn Marie, and sometimes Leroy. Hey, Leroy. Hey, Leroy. You're a good boy. Oh, good boy.